really helps me kind of frame out. Data security, we're going to button all of that up with data security because that's really what it's about. Making sure that, look, I always tell clients, Copilot doesn't introduce risk, it surfaces risk. If you have risk, if you have overexposure, overshared, overpermission, Copilot's not going to make that happen. It's going to surface that. It's going to say, you have access to this file. Maybe you shouldn't have because somebody's done an organizational link, right? That's bad. Don't do organizational links. Use direct links. And certainly don't do it on anything. So we'll talk a little bit about that. So as we understand it, it's embedded in every app. If you've got Copilot, how many of you have Copilot and running with Copilot right now? Okay, great. Third, roughly, that's great. When you do, and you'll see this here in just a little bit, we do our live demo, but it's embedded right there in all the apps. It's right alongside it. You grab the proposals you say from yesterday's meeting, that's right, for example. It'll kind of grab that file, all using that graph, right? And it's using that large language model. That's an AI algorithm that basically says natural language. I don't have to talk like a robot. All of that. I get the exact verbiage that I want. As much detail with that as we bring it exactly in. I want you, Copilot, do, give me this file. Or oftentimes, what I'll do is I'll say, give me all of the conversations I've had with. We'll say Matt Holt, who's one of the personas in the demo. Matt Holt, in Teams and email, list the dates, sort by timestamp, and give me actionable items. Oh, and put it in a table format. It'll do it like that, right? So as much detail as possible. And of course, integrates with the graph. The architecture behind all this, pretty simple, really. User sends a prompt, create a file, do this. Write me a PowerPoint presentation on Teams Premium Edition, right? It just lays it out there for you. And from there, you just kind of tweak it. So Copilot will access the graph. That's where all the content's stored. That's the grounding of the graph, but optional web grounding, and that is, we'll see it in a little bit. You have the option of work and web. You can turn those off. You can turn the web off. But basically, it says, if I can't find what I'm looking for in your data in the graph, I'm going to go out to the public internet, just kind of like a Google search on steroids, really, kind of what it does. From there, it sends that out to the large language model, that modified prompt. Actually, what it's doing, we're going to see this in a little bit, literally extracting the data, sending it to the LLM, and then it's coming back with a response, and then it's going to send it through the compliance center, now the Purview, right? So it's going to send it through Purview for any of those stamps, for labels, classification, permissioning, DLP, all of that's going to apply, and we'll see that in our demo just a little bit. So once it gets through that, all through the graph, then finally it's going to send that response back to that user. And so the graph, as I said, it just really contains everything in 365. If you have any more questions about any of that, certainly happy to dive into that or answer any questions about it. But basically, the graph is everything you see in 365. That's your emails, that's your teams, chats, and groups, and that stuff, right? So as we get into security foundations, just the fundamentals around this, it's important to understand that several takeaways from this right here is the inputs are not, Microsoft isn't saying, oh, okay, well, somebody else can see this input. Those inputs can be discoverable. So we can't, an admin can pull the Copilot prompts. If somebody types in a question to Copilot is e-discoverable, can pull that, but nobody else can. We're not training anything. It's different. It's not ChatGPT. It's not a trained model. It's not learning your data and training off of it. It is important to structure your data properly. That's part of governance. And that is, if you have files that contain conflicting information, Copilot still wants that source of truth. It wants the right source of truth for that information. So data structure is important, but it's not training that model. It's not that type of model. And here's a key takeaway here. This is where I want to zero in on. If a user has access, Copilot has access. So Copilot's not introducing that risk. It's going to surface risk. So if a user has access to salary information because somebody sent an organizational link accidentally or on purpose, not even understanding. And now, even though not everybody in the organization is going to get a notification, but everybody has access. So if they start thinking around with Copilot, start throwing prompts in there, it's going to surface that. We'll see that.
Let's just add to that just for a minute, because I really like that comparison. It reminds me a lot of two things. Like I remember when we first came out with internet search, right? So Microsoft came out with their first search server. It was part of their web server. And what was really cool about it is you could point it at your web server and then of course search it, but you could point it at other people's web servers too. That was really cool. But to your point, what was really interesting about that is it opened up a lot of people's eyes because a lot of people didn't realize what people could see on their website, until it was actually crawled by a search engine.
Yeah.
And then you fast forward like a decade later, and I feel like we saw this again when we introduced enterprise search, right? So then 10 years later, then Google bought an enterprise search and Microsoft bought an enterprise search through SharePoint. Mm-hmm. And it was the same exact thing. People would deploy enterprise search. They would be horrified at what they found. They'd be like, oh my God, this, shut it off, that kind of thing. And so to your point, then we fast forward 10 years again, and here we are with, with Copilot, right? And it's the same, that discoverable, the accidental discovery of data. Yeah, yes, so that's what that is.
Yeah, that's a great point. And that is the actual, that's the premises that we use with Copilot Studio.
Yeah.
When I do Copilot Studio, actually presenting at a user group in St. Louis in March, in beds, one of the sessions where implicated is about deploying bots inside of like Teams, for example, and where you use your own data as its knowledge source. So it doesn't go to the graph, entire graph. It doesn't go to the web. It's limited to a SharePoint site.
Yeah.
Specific site, and in that site you may have document libraries. You may have, in one case, I have a demo of it. I've got thousands of Microsoft documentation in there.
Yeah.
PDFs just from Microsoft. So you know what I do? I call that bot my 365 knowledge base. I literally can go in there to chat in Teams and call it up and ask any topic.
Yeah.
And it's going to pull it, but only from those sources. That's what we use with Copilot Studio. No code. It literally takes me 10 minutes.
And it's still search.
Yes.
Oddly enough.
Yes.
Right? Like underneath, especially when you're doing RAG with your own corporate data. Yeah. I mean, literally, Microsoft does that in Azure through, I think they call it Azure AI Search now. They renamed it last year, right? For AI. So oddly enough, it's still search. We're just like 3 decades into it.
Really, when you really get under the hood, it's like
2 decades into it. Sorry, 2 decades.
This is so simplistic, right? This is just not crazy. So zero trust. What's the premises of zero trust? What is that? Zero trust. We'll talk about that. It's not a strategy, or it is a strategy. It's not a program. It's not a service. It's an actual approach to security, but it runs on a principle. Anybody know what that is? Always verify. Never trust, always verify. That's the principle of zero trust. And it basically means treat every device, application, email, everything as though it came from, assume it came from an untrusted source. That's what zero trust is. So that's something we need to think about when we're talking about these 6 pillars here of identity, endpoints, and application networks, infrastructure, and data. Really our focuses today. But assume that it's been breached. Assume that it's at risk. And so we govern our entire principle of security around that assumption right there. Is that the idea of zero trust. And so with zero trust, as it applies, we have users and applications, or users and desktops, right? You want to secure those out, endpoint or whatever VM solution you may have. But then the applications, and within that, those applications have licensed for Copilot. You've got Copilot. Copilot's accessing the graph. The graph is accessing all of the bells, everything under the hood. OneDrive, folders, files, Exchange data, Teams, SharePoint, and then on that goes. And so, yeah. so that's the idea of that. I'll skip down here to the bottom. So without robust data governance, basically you're at risk. So if you're oversharing, talked about that, the type of sharing. Best practices is to use use a direct link, configure your share principles and policies with a direct link and view only. That's generally just what we suggest from there. But you know, of course, anytime you're dealing with PII, PHI, or healthcare, you're dealing with a lot of PHI and stuff like that. But apply sensitivity labels. That's almost every takeaway from assessment we do. Do classification, data classification, classify your data, and apply labels. We recommend an E5 compliance or an E5 SKU so that you're doing auto classification. Don't depend on the users to actually apply a label. Do auto classification. Access permissions, that's something that nobody overlooks it. Everybody thinks about it, but it gets really out of hand. And I see a lot of migrations from like a file server to SharePoint. They're just pretty much lift and shift. They're using even if they use like Migration Manager, which I think is a fine tool to do that. Never migrate the permissions, because now you're just taking permissions that don't exist in SharePoint, and you have actually migrated them. And what you end up with, user translates to everyone except external when you go to SharePoint. So what happens is now you just everybody up to that document library. So always use the native permissions if you're doing a SharePoint move or something like that, which is pretty much owners, members, visitors, right? And implement DLP policy. That speaks to what I said about what do you have in place that prevents the accidental sharing of sensitive information. DLP policy, data loss or leak protection, and how you want to say it, but it's both the same thing there. So tools we definitely go to when we're talking thinking Copilot, audit, who's doing what, who's done what. We keep a record of that, get that turned on. Now, e-discovery, be able to search content, block cases, information protection, that is labeling, data loss prevention, adaptive protection. Adaptive protection isn't E5 365, and basically the graphic on the right shows what that really is. Basically, it says we'll apply a DLP policy based on the user risk. So if a user in maybe improbable travel, right? They've signed in Boston, and then next thing you know, they're signed in LA or Singapore. That's improbable travel. Is it impossible? No. You can RDP remote in, right? It's not impossible. It's just improbable. And what's going to do is going to flag a user risk. Well, with adaptive protection, it'll just say, there's something suspicious, so I'm going to apply a different DLP policy. It's good.
Just for people that might be newer, Microsoft Purview is basically Microsoft's answer to data. And the reason I think that it's really why this is so timely in certain files, it's the presentation, is because a couple of months ago, the Microsoft Ignite, which is their largest conference, they do once a year, the common was to prepare for AI, protect your data. And Microsoft's answer for that was perfect. And so I just didn't want to assume that everybody here knew what Purview was, et cetera, et cetera. But with that said now, and then please carry on. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, that's great, because I get that a lot. I get customers will call, or I'll get a sales guy, actual sales guy, who will say, "Hey, I have a client who wants to talk about Purview." They think they want to buy Purview. Like, okay, what's their license? They have E3. They have Purview. They think it's this mysterious thing, when the reality is it's the compliance center. It's the old compliance center. They've just Microsoft name game, right? They just changed it to Purview. Now, yes, as you scale up, you can get different, certainly different levels, obviously, and different lengths. Okay, for example, auditing has moved now from, I think E3 is it was 90 days, now it's 180, it's 6 months, and then with the E5, it's 1 year of the audit track. So, e-discovery, right? E3, you get simplified e-discovery, content search, you can get advanced e-discovery with an E5, which means I could do redactions, I could do markups, I could do a lot of other things. Just, same thing with adaptive protection, that sort of thing. Just some things here. Look, just because you can doesn't mean you should. If you have business standard, don't run Copilot. Microsoft will let you do it, but don't do it because there is no purview in business standard. There is purview in business premium. People don't even know that. They're like, I need to go to E3. No, you don't. Now, if you want some of the additional bells and whistles, yes, but purview is included in business premium. It's not in standard. It just comes with Entra ID free. So there's none of these security safeguards there. What else? New version of Outlook. You want to use that. And you want to use Teams version 2. You don't have to, but you should use version 2. Beyond that, any other call outs there? If you're going to do it in Loop, enable it in your tenant, right? It's not enabled. So some of the call outs there. Some of the quick best practices here, just more of a recap. Identify your data, classify, right? Classification. What type of data is it? Is it patient information? Is it diagnosis? Is it financial information? This sort of thing. Social security numbers, credit cards, all of that. Data labeling. And geographical restrictions there. Not so much a problem probably here, but I did present this to the European or the SharePoint Europe conference, and they have, the EU boundaries, right? So that's a big thing there, as well as the new European AI Protection Act, relatively new-ish, but it basically common sense, safeguard your data. Right? I mean, apply the principles of zero trust, right? And then we always recommend AI impact readiness assessment. What's the risk? What's privacy concerns there? We do this. We actually use Microsoft's own template for this, where we'll do kind of an assessment that basically says, are you technically ready? Do you have the licenses that you should have? Do you have, adoption? It comes down to adoption a lot. That's where we drive a lot of our thinking is through adoption. Are you using Teams? Are you using OneDrive? Are you not? Copilot's probably not really all that good. So, and then we get into actual files. What does it look like? Speaking of, let's see if our CDX tenant is going to cooperate. And we're going to look at a couple different things here in Copilot from a live demo quickly. So I am here in one of my personas, which is Gerald Wolf. Now I'm going to try something here. Because I cheat, I use the clipboard, and I'm going to say, I want you to list me salaries for my organization. Now Copilot's probably going to fail on this just because it does. I don't know why it doesn't like this. We'll see what happens. Actually, that's the best it's done all day. So let me show you what we've got here. It says, okay, actually, no, it didn't for some reason pull the file, and I'll show you why that is. So I'm gonna cheat a little bit more. It did pull some stuff, and notice it's pulling stuff from the graph. It's referencing documents I do have in my OneDrive. However, there's a file that's been shared with this persona. He doesn't own it, and I'm going to call it up using the same prompt here. And to do this, in some prompts you can do / it's not. Every time you come in here, it's different. I don't know what it is. It's Microsoft just can't leave well enough alone. But anyway, I'm just kidding. It's all good. It's great. So there's the actual file. Not in normal situations, but I've locked this file down using a label. You'll see that. So I'm going to say, okay, now I know the file. Now, if I didn't have a label on this, this would have come up, and this is what I'm talking about, an organizational link. But now I'm just poking around. I've got access to this, but it is protected by a label. We're going to see that. So it's going to say here, let's scroll up here. It appears to be protected. I can't extract any specific data from it. I want you to remember that word because I talked about it earlier when I said that the data is actually extracted from and goes through the LLM through Purview. It's giving you the exact verbiage here. Now I'm going to pull this up and I'm going to see. I can look at the file, but why can't Copilot actually pull this information for me? I can see it does have a label. This label called PII label. I can see I have read-only access, and I do have a dynamic watermark. Now that watermark, notice it's not moving with the file or the content. It's actually just on that dynamic watermark is not actually in the label. It's in the label policy. Show you that. It's in the label, but it's not. It's a little different. It's part of the deployment. I'll show you what that looks. So, but why can't Copilot pull this information out, even though I do have read-only access to that file? Well, I'll go into the admin side of that, and we'll actually look at this label real quick, and we'll kind of glean some insights from how Copilot reacts to security labels or classification labels. So here's the label, and I have control access. Notice I'm not telling the label to apply this content marking. I'm not doing this in the label. I'm actually doing it in the deployment, which is right here, and we'll see this dynamic. It's just a checkbox now, which is really cool because now it just puts the UPN across. So it's a dynamic watermark. So I've enabled that. Now notice it says some Gerald Wolf viewer. And we're going to look at the permissions. And this is how the permissions are structured when you're dealing with a label and Copilot. He has view access, but the permission he does not have is extract. That's a specific permission for Copilot in order to actually pull the data out. Or copy, which is what I said that Copilot actually does when it takes that response, finds the file, takes it to the LLM and says, okay, it's doing this AI stuff, sends it through Purview. Purview says, doesn't have extract permission. I can see that I can show that they have access to the file, but I'm not going to pull any data out of it. I'm not going to answer the prompt. I'm not going to say, oh, here are the top 3 salaries, right? Because it doesn't have the right permission because of that extract. So the takeaway here, I'm going to cancel out of this. We'll demo this in one other way here. I'm going to prompt up a new chat here. In this one, we're going to go. Matoso's got a credit card count file out there, and I want to take a look at it. I know I probably have access to it. And there it is. And it pulled it. So it pulled that account number, the Visa account number in this case, not a real Visa account number. And we're going to go up in here and we're going to open this and see that there's a label applied. It's a sensitive label. It's marked orange, which is true. And I have read-only access here as well. Okay, but I'm seeing the data. Okay, what's the difference? Well, if we look at the permissions within the label itself, in this case it's a sensitive label. We'll go back, we'll edit this, and take a look at the permissions. So we did not see a watermark. I didn't point that out, and that's because in the permissions I did not check this dynamic watermark. I do, but you notice it's custom now. And if we look at this, we'll see that the permissions are actually view only, but I've added copy and extract. So the takeaway is if you're protecting your data with labeling, which you should in part, permissions certainly too, but labeling I think is more powerful. But view only without that copy and extract, Copilot can't interact with the content. The other thing I like about labels is that it will inherit a label if you use Copilot to create another file. Give you an example. It's a very common scenario. If I'm in a PowerPoint presentation, I often will create a file, create a PowerPoint from this file. So for example, we do a long assessment. Well, maybe I don't want to sit through a 40-page assessment presentation for a client. So maybe I will say, hey, Copilot, give me an executive summary of this Word file. So we'll do that. And so I'm going to create a file from was struggling with this earlier. I don't know why it was not loading here. Actually, I'll do it this way because they've added this little feature where you can actually attach a file right into it, and it will do the semantic index right there. That's the file. The semantic indexing, by the way, is what Copilot is doing. It's crawling that data to kind of index the data that's in SharePoint and in the OneDrive and all of that. So in this case, I'm kind of speeding up the process. And we'll see what happens. But here's what I expect, because it has definitely worked for me before, is that this new PowerPoint presentation will get the certificate, or the label rather, from the original file. Because it knows the original file is protected, it's going to now protect this because it contains the information that the original file had. We'll let that marinate. It's I was having a little bit of trouble with it before. Worked fine, and then it didn't. But here's the thing. Here's something I tell clients all the time. You know, Copilot has some nuances, and there's some things and bugs, and it's not perfect. But here's what's cool. As good as it is, it's as bad today as it's ever going to be. So when you stop to think about that, it's pretty good. We'll let that go. It may finish. It may whatever. It probably finish when I get back to the hotel. But here's the thing.
Better, when you say it's better in some apps than others, like I feel like it's gotten better in Outlook. It's good in Teams. Like it's getting. There's already really great stuff in Teams. There's good stuff in Outlook. PowerPoint, I'm with you. Like I feel like it generates like high school level slides, but I haven't looked at it in a couple months. You know what I mean? The PowerPoint one.
What it does for me in PowerPoint is at least frames some things and gives me some thoughts. Yeah. So I'm always going to change I don't like the graphics it pulls. I don't like a lot of the design. But at least we'll say, hey, for slide one, maybe this and maybe that. Yeah. It'll kind of put it together. At least gives me a jump start. That's where I was. Yes.
The sales Copilot too. Yeah. I've been really liking. It's like that one. I feel like it already does a bunch of agentic stuff. Like it's always working in the background. Like even today, I just got mailed a new sales card because of the appointment.
Yeah. No, that's definitely a great point. One of the things that, let me see if because I do these demos a lot, and I probably have some. Let's see if I have this in here. This is an example, right? I don't know. I haven't done this prompt in a little while, but I want the latest. It's kind of what I demoed, or what I talked about earlier, where I said, "Hey, I want all the conversations between me and whoever it was, Megan Bowen, and I want to, I didn't ask for specifics, but it gave me enough specifics. But what I did want is I want, let me see, okay, this is the context of the chat. So until I go up and hit new chat, the context is what we were just talking about. So basically I said, okay, fine, you gave me all that. But now what I want is I want actionable items from all of the conversations between me and this person. So to me, that's game changer. And then if you've ever looked at, we won't take the time to do it, but if you've ever looked at, I just did a demo for a client the other day on Teams Premium, but specifically Intelligent Recap. If you've not seen Intelligent Recap, that is impressive. Yes, unbelievable.
That's what I was getting at. Like there's some Copilot things that, like for me, I would pay for Copilot just because of what it does in Teams.
100%.
But I wouldn't, but there's other apps I wouldn't do it for. But it's so good in Teams. Yeah. And we spend more and more of our time in there now, right? And it's like when you see it summarize a meeting of 8 people and then create a to-do list and like just all the story in seconds.
Yes, because what it actually what it actually does inside of Teams is pretty impressive. In the only area that, because a lot of customers will ask me, so should I go Teams or Teams Premium or Copilot? Like, Teams Premium and Copilot only overlap in one feature, and that is Intelligent Recap. Intelligent Recap, Copilot does have that capability as well as Teams Premium. So here's, yeah, of course, there they go. They changed it from file to share. So this is an example of just to show you what a recap looked like. Me and one of my colleagues, one of my guys on my team, just did literally we did our one-on-one meeting, and I said, join with this persona and let's do it. Let's have Teams Premium. Copilot's the exact same. It's just because I'm saying Teams Premium, we were just demoing Teams Premium. It's identical. But you can see, of course, we watermarked. That's just a security feature. We can add it or not. Then we have all the topics of the video. It breaks it into topics, and then even breaks it into chapters, much like YouTube would, right? We can go skip to any conversational part of it. But then not only that, we have all the conversation that we talked about, and at the end down here, it gives us all, based on who said what, all of your action items are right there.
And you can chat with them.
Yeah.
So this is just a starting point.
Yeah.
Now I can say, okay, tell me.
I can extract data from it.
Remind me what you was saying about that. Tell me more about that thing. You see, so that's just setting the stage and giving you all the data. Then, yeah, sorry, but that's such a powerful feature. So I just wanted to share that.
That right there. I mean, look.
Some hope.
So
here's some AI goodness out there.
Yeah, because if I'm looking at I mean, here's the way I look at it. Look, so okay, Copilot $30, Copilot $30 a year, right? Okay. Well, if you break that down, if you think about how many meetings we're all in, notes that takes the time it takes to write notes, and that's just that feature, right? Tons more that it will do, but I think I saw in a Microsoft slide somewhere the math behind that is you have somebody that's making $70,000 a year, they only have to save 54 minutes a month, and you paid for Copilot. So when you break it down like that, Copilot paid for itself in no time. When it first came out, I was like, $30, that's a hard sell. It's really not. It really isn't. So I'll just finish with this. This is just kind of our program. Again, we talk about discovery and doing a full security review, reviewing and policy security, DLP policies, permissioning. We talk about, we go through some remediation there. We have a couple in flight right now, actually, that are going through some labeling and classifying. We just kind of hand that off to our engineering team. They kind of work with the client. Policy remediation, doing, labels and all of that. And then, of course, we offer strategic consulting service where you have one of our advisors holding your hand for however many hours a month that you need. And then, of course, we always believe that the success of Copilot and most things in 365 go a lot further when you have some sort of training initiative for your end users. And we do have a dedicated trainer. That's all he does. He's an adoption advisor, and so that's exactly what he does. And so it was a fantastic job. Other than that, again, my contact card. Hit me up on LinkedIn. My email address. I answer questions all the time, and so I have absolutely no problem with that. On LinkedIn, connect with me there. I do a bi-weekly, so 1st and 15th, I do a newsletter out of LinkedIn that covers a variety of topics, but mostly around compliance, Copilot, the Microsoft 365 stack. I don't get a whole lot into Azure. I do a lot in Entra ID, so I do a lot of identity governance, but not a whole lot on the Azure side. So that's all I got.
That's awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
So I was really thankful to see the presentation on Purview and the data protection, just because it's core to to protecting the data in Copilot, not just to. And I actually just like putting my engineer hat on. I think the thing that got me most excited about that was that it was a really good architecture decision. I think because you're looking at it from their perspective. They saw 24 months ago. Okay, I explain it this way, that it's so far the first year they grew by $1 trillion, but it was all just like B2C stuff, right? Like the first Copilot was B2C. ChatGPT was all B2C. But Microsoft knew right away the first time they saw this technology that eventually they'd connect it to Active Directory and the graph, right? I remember I was actually in some crazy place like West Africa or someplace with some Microsoft engineers a year ago, and I told them that. I was like, I know you're going to make $2 trillion of it. You know why? It's because of Active Directory. It was still called Active Directory a year ago, or Entra ID. So it's actually, for me, that's what I really like about Purview, and also the fact that they have Entra ID there, is that they're using it well in the architecture to protect AI. Like, just to me, it makes sense. If you're already doing a bunch of stuff with DLP, protecting content in SharePoint, protecting content in your file shares, stopping people from downloading healthcare data, that type of stuff. It just seems to make sense that you would put your AI on top of that, right? Especially because they did it, they put their search on top of that as well, right? So, well, I guess search came first, and then they added the DLP layers to search as well. So it really is truly, you truly can extend it out to the enterprise and beyond the AI content, right? You could do an email bug. You can have those same labels on your Exchange server. You can have those same labels on your data, in your, don't quote me on this part, the data lake stuff, because some of that's still new, but I'm assuming you can. Sorry, I just remembered. Yeah. So out to your data lake, etc. So it truly is enterprise wide. It's not just at the ChatGPT level or just at the document level, if you will. And so that's why one of the reasons I was so excited about your topic tonight is just that its relevance. And really, I would even go further and say everything, getting back to the B2B side of it, right? And so my prediction has been that there's still another 2 trillion in the enterprise B2B space that we'll see in the next 12 to 36 months, right? As people start taking these next steps and connecting to their data, et cetera, et cetera. Now, what could change that a little bit is DeepSeek, right? Because now that's having me think about it. Is it going to be 2 trillion or is it going to be 1.5 trillion? It's still going to be a lot, like obviously Microsoft's still going to do really, really well. But, it's a really, that was the big news this week, right? It's like, wow, we all got our eyes open. Wow, there's real competition in the world. We need to get serious, right? About our work. And so that was fascinating. And I predict that's what will happen. Like, I do think we'll probably just get more serious about our work. I would like to think so, Yeah,
I would suggest that there are more places where you
yeah.
you can put it in, right?
Yeah, you're preaching to the choir, because what I remind people, first of all, is this is a global effort, right? There's this is just 7.8 billion people on the planet, right? We only have 340 million. Every country with a data center, and even some countries that don't have a data center, want this technology. Most of them are not held up for chips, but really what they want is they want their kids to be a little bit smarter, just like we want our kids to be a little smarter, and they want their citizens to be a little bit healthier, just like we want our citizens to be a little bit healthier, right? So there's that part. I'll start with that. And then I'll say this, I will say that in my opinion, DeepSeek is not that complicated. It's a textbook 101 example of how open source in a open market will always prevail over closed corporate source code. And I think that's exactly what happened. And I know this sounds so crazy, but I'll even go a little bit further. And I'll say we can thank Mark Zuckerberg for it. We can actually thank Zuck because he made that decision 18 months ago. It was a huge risk. He's like, I'm going to go all open source with Llama, right? And he put his whole team on that and send it out open source. And that spurred this huge, as a matter of fact, we wouldn't even be where we are with agents right now if it wasn't for that. Yeah. Because when he released that open source, then LangChain was invented. The guys invented LangChain. And that's reason, what do they call that now? Reasoning or whatever. It's basically LangChain, evolved, right? So I would submit, and then you could take it even a step further and say OpenAI wouldn't exist if it wasn't for open source, right? That's just a fact, because they build on top of the Meta code base for creating the LLM. What is it? The Meta's libraries for creating, what is it, sir? PyTorch, thank you, which is open source, right? Correct me if I'm wrong, right? So if it wasn't for open source, they wouldn't have even had PyTorch to even make, OpenAI. So I'm with you. As a matter of fact, and I would even go one step further, and I wonder why we're even banning chips from China. Because I would say, frankly, as an engineer, that's a little bit embarrassing. Like, why don't we just open up the markets and open up open source? And if the companies all want to fight closed source, that's great. Let's all have fair competition. So anyway, I'll get off my soapbox now. But you just, you asked the question to the wrong person because I couldn't agree with you more. And I do think this will push it forward, especially those smaller parts of the world. We forget in Boston, we could throw a rock here and you could hit an AI expert or a doctor. You know what I mean? But you go to West Africa, you could travel hundreds of miles and not find neither, right? And so that all of a sudden the technology takes on a different meaning there. Okay, love this stuff. Great talk. What do you think? Do you agree with my assertions?
It's
Yeah.
what's really interesting is this, I mean, things really seem to kind of accelerate a lot since 2017.
Yeah, I
There's
agree.
kind of this big lull in technology. Where,
Yeah.
I mean, Microsoft was moving the keys around and doing some different things, but nothing earth shattering. And then all of a sudden, then ChatGPT and now, okay, and Microsoft has 40% of that. And it's like, okay, well. And so now it's just like, I tell our folks on my team, at least as consultants, I'm like, we're literally one page ahead of everybody else.
Yeah.
That's just the way, like, because it's blistering pace right now, trying to keep up with that. I mean, Elon Musk got his own thing going right there on X. Or
Yeah. No, I couldn't agree more. I put it this way: cloud just got boring, right? For people that have been in the industry a long time, I'm with you. Like I didn't feel like there was really any innovation happening.
Yeah,
Even with the machine learning stuff. I mean, it was cool, but I was looking at what people were doing with machine learning, and they were selling it as AI, and it was like, But I will say this:
I remember that Ignite years ago when they were talking about fluid. That's where it came from.
Yeah.
Right? They were talking about this concept of fluid, and then from there you kind of got loop, and then okay, where we've got this canvas that we can just kind of move all over the place, and everybody still. But then you throw Copilot into that. It's a crazy time to be in IT, that's for sure.
Yeah.
And I didn't think that would be the case, but it was like, it was true. Gas on that.
I totally agree. And since we're winding down, I will say this, because I talked a lot about open source. I do think that Microsoft as a corporate software company is extremely well positioned to make meaningful change around the world with AI. And I wouldn't just say that lightly. I mean, you already heard, listen to me talk. I don't hold back normally. But like when we look at what Naveen's team is doing at Nuance with DAX Copilot and how that's already deployed in over 400 hospitals today. A lot of people don't even know this around the US and different, test scenarios or whatever. We're just talking about Copilot here, but then remember they also have all of Azure and Azure OpenAI. And my guess is they'll probably open that to DeepSeek. They have every other model up there. They have Mistral up there, in Azure OpenAI. So you probably see it up there eventually. But I'm going out on a limb there. Don't hold me that one. But my point is, I feel like they're really well positioned because it's not just on the business software side. It's also on the Azure side, and they're investing heavily in industry. My personal favorite, of course, healthcare, but there's also heavy investment in finance, as you noted, automotive, retail is huge right now. So I wanted to make sure I added that because I'm a huge proponent of open source, but I want to make sure that didn't come across the wrong way. I mean, part of what makes open source successful, I think the best work is when it sort of comes together, right? When you have the huge companies that can provide the hardware and the compute power, et cetera. And then you open up the software to the communities, my personal opinion, I think that's.
Sure.
But there's like the business development, right? Because Facebook were in in some sense, unique position, right? That their main business was not the software, right? Their main business was the advertisement, right? So therefore they were not in the same way giving away an investment, right? That they were able to monetize, right? The way that Google or or OpenAI, right, were doing with their models, right?
I agree, but only to a certain point, because I think very early on, every company, especially all of the hyperscalers and the big companies like Facebook, Amazon, Google, they knew this was a game changer. So I agree with you, but then trust me, when they were having these meetings about whether to go open source or whatnot, and I think proof of that is the recent announcements that just made, because he sort of drifted back to VR again, if you noticed, right? But then in the last couple of months, he's come back to AI again, and he's actually just made a huge announcement that they're going to invest huge this year You know, so I'm with you and I agree in spirit, but I think they flipped just like everybody. At some point, we all saw the light, right? Or most of us saw the light. And I'm just saying at some point, Facebook realized that they were going to have to become somewhat an AI company as well. That's just my personal thought. And it was a brilliant move to go. So what other choice did they have at the time? They had already got their butts kicked by Microsoft, OpenAI, right? Microsoft had just invested heavily. Google already had their stuff going. You know, it's just, I don't know. It's a great debate over a beer, but that's just my opinion. What's that? Yeah, that's outside my wheelhouse. So I won't go down that road, yeah.
That didn't become the success they had hoped for.
Sure, yeah, not yet, yeah. And I agree, metaverse was something that never didn't pan out the way that we thought it would. Yeah, 100%. I agree with that.
So I have a question.
Yeah.
How is it producing this?
Well, it depends on how well you ground your data. That's basically a message coming from Microsoft. So for example, when he uploaded that spreadsheet, it should lock in on that spreadsheet and only answer. But of course, I mean, you could hallucinate in the context of the spreadsheet.
Yeah, I'm just curious to say, you know, to see how, you know, that there's a risk.
I mean, it's definitely, let me put it this way. I think the problem could just be the expectation. Like if you're going into it thinking Copilot is just going to fart out the perfect book chapter or something, it's just not going to happen. But if you sit there patiently and have a conversation with it and first create an outline together and tell it to tweak this and that, you know what I mean?
The basic thing is really paying attention. That's how, well, you know.
Yeah, exactly.
Convincing sounding garbage, you'll know it's convincing sounding garbage.
Yeah, by the way, it does that all the time.
But,
Yeah.
you know, the issue you'll have with that is you'll have with that is people pay attention.
Which could be more.
But in some sense, right? So how prone are humans to produce?
Oh, I'm not saying that humans aren't in other words. I'm just interested in what people's experience are. That it's rare or that
I can tell you real world because I use it all the time. What I find is that if I have to really read it carefully because it will create an email that sounds really good.
Yeah.
But if I put my hat on and I step back and I really read, I'm like, no, it needs some detail about this, that, right? But that's my point. You can still have that conversation with the Copilot. Just don't expect that it's just going to give you that out of the box. You know, like it's going to take some work. As a matter of fact, truth be known, I was working literally working on this stuff every day. Today, what we were working on, okay, so we're doing a new ebook on agents in healthcare targeted towards executives, right? So the whole point is to demystify agents and agentic algorithms and help people realize it's just code above all, right? So of course, the first thing I'm going to do is the first thing for me, the way I work is, okay, I need to come out with my outline, my table of contents, right? That just makes sense. And so I know a rough what that is, so I got a couple bullet points, and I'll start there with the thing, right? But my point is, I may even bounce over to Perplexity, and then go back to ChatGPT, and then finally end up in Copilot, and then after that, Grammarly might do the final polish, you know. So I'm actually using like 4 AIs to get that one chapter done, because I count Grammarly as well, because Grammarly is all AI driven now, and it's doing the final polish, and it knows about my writing style and all of that, right? So, you know, real world. And yes, when I'm using especially Copilot, honestly, Copilot, the one you have to be careful of. And in all fairness, it's tasked a lot, right? It's expected to do everything. And so, yeah, to your point, there'll be times where I'll be like, okay, draft an email. And I'll look at the email. And again, I probably could send it, but it probably won't get a response that I want. And the person reading it probably won't even know why they don't, you know what I mean? It's almost like at a subconscious level. And then what happens is when you start looking at it more and more, you start to pattern recognize it. So then you can actually see when other people do it to you. When somebody sends you an email, you know, and it's got that sort of Copilot sound to it or whatever. So anyway, that's why.
Yeah. That you can only, like I've seen that a number of times, right? That it can only work with the information that you have given with it.
Right, yeah.
So if you give it like draft an email that is talking about this, right?
Yeah.
It has your talking points, it can expand them out nicely sounding, right? But there is no more depth
Exactly.
in what you gave into it, right? And that's
Yes.
what you then.
That's the fluff it makes up.
Right.
Yeah.
And then that is when you then have the conversation and you precise it, right?
Exactly.
That is that you then add all the details that are in your head, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And then the one last thing I would add is I repeat, rinse and repeat. So then once you do it, don't ever be happy. Like ask it multiple times. And then so what I'll do is I'll take the final one that I get from ChatGPT, I'll massage it in Microsoft Word a little bit, and then I'll send it into like Gemini or something or Claude, you know, and say, okay, what do you think of this? You know, that type of thing. So,
So let's do this. We get into a situation where you're using all these tools and feeding it all through these things, and in the end, you haven't actually saved yourself any time to produce a better outcome.
I haven't seen it yet. Not when it comes to writing. And maybe in all fairness, it's because I'm an engineer. So maybe I would feel differently about code because I can read code like reading a book. But I'm not a business person. I just started building a business and learning about business 2 years ago, right? So for me, it's exponential. Like I wouldn't even know where to start with something like a marketing plan or like a SWOT analysis of how my team is doing here. You know, stuff like that. I would have to spend, it would have probably realistically, I wouldn't be able to do it, you know? But now I can, you know the rest of the story. So,
But
yeah.
those are exact same scenarios. So we will have customers, let's say, it's very small businesses, they have no process. They don't even have anything.
Right, yeah, yeah.
So we'll throw that right into Copilot.
Yep.
There you go. Yeah. Everything will require some tweaking.
Yeah.
You're gonna have to do, but it basically will frame it out. Frame it out pretty well. But yeah, it's sometimes when it comes to like emails and conversations, well, sometimes they're a little overly polished. So
Titles too. Have you noticed now so many titles with a colon in it? Like that's a ChatGPT thing. I noticed it. Like when ChatGPT first came out, it would always do like titles, it's like 3 words, colon something. And now that's a pattern. Now you see it everywhere. Like session titles to conferences and stuff like this. So listen, we have to be sensitive at the time. We have to be out of here. I meant to give this notice a couple minutes ago. It's 10 of now, and we have the room until 7. So I'm just gonna remind you to also just, you can do a quick search for Boss Hug or the Boston Healthcare User Group, and we've got links to all our meetups and all that stuff coming up. If you haven't joined our mailing list, definitely join our mailing list because we'll be sending a lot of information about the event in April. And definitely reach out to me if you're interested in participating as an organizer or as an advisor or even as a speaker at the event. And we'll meet here next month, February, the last Wednesday of the month. I don't remember the exact date. And so with that, I'll let you guys just sort of wind down your conversations. I'm going to start picking up the food. But we do try to be respectful of their time and be out of here promptly at 7, which is in 10 minutes. So, so, okay. Thank you. And thank you again. And thank you again. Yeah, I saw that. No, I do recognize it. Thank you for sitting up for us. Yes. I'm not. No, my niece is. No.
yeah, we were quite a bit into this meeting.
As a matter of fact, I was just in southern India. Yeah, it's because my wife is a teacher at College School. And so we both traveled to India and we learned those I'll introduce you. Great. Yeah, we're still going. Still going. We're like 2 years into it. Yeah, we were one of the very first to write Copilot. And so when the presentation was last year, we had we were building Copilot. This year was more of we're not publishing quite as much because let's just say we inspired a lot of people early on. We're trying to keep it in the market wrap. But it's, you know, it's tough. Don't get me wrong. Like, we kind of had our first, well, hospital. That's the small stuff is keeping this going for now. Thanks for asking.
So you were you're building presentation also.
And what's interesting is that's the stuff that on the technical stuff. So that presentation I did, if you remember for how so that's all the agenda. So if you were to go your own, code that agent, you would basically do this. So it's funny. So for us, when they well, what we did is we took body work side. We wanted something. So what we did is Microsoft stack the software development. We built right on top of it. And then my message to people who might remember that session was that sometimes only comes from script. That's the second thing. It was new, but it wasn't necessarily from scratch. Have somewhere between like 7 and maybe we have one really big system that has it in probably close to well, mostly now, but that's just because in the last 10 years, there's so much consolidation. Everybody's going by hospital system now. But that, to your point, there still is a small, but even then, if they're consolidating, like there is a called the American Hospital Association Rural Group. And so they actually have an event coming up next month in San Antonio, Texas. It's pretty cool. I highly recommend it. But there, they actually do focus on rural hospitals. So you might find some of the smaller ones. Our philosophy so far is we're building. We're building yes, yeah. Well, I mean, it's hard to say, and it's all how do you quantify it. Here's a great example of that. So I also do some stuff locally, such as and I spent a lot of time in the last few years. It's really fascinating work. They're just starting to build up now. They're literally having to start with. And so, of course, now in Malaysia, they can't pay Boston rates, right? So if they were to hire somebody like first of all, you wouldn't be able to afford an Epic or something. So they have to look at the rental stores. Maybe if they did it with Epic, it would be $100 million project. But maybe if they do open source, they do a Paul Swider, maybe it's only a $20 million project. But if you were to ask me, $20 million is still a lot of money. You know what I mean? It's a smaller company. That's all relative. I guess is what I'm trying to say. Especially when we're competing with $1 billion companies, right? I mean, anybody that's in healthcare technology, Microsoft, Netflix, and that's just to get started. Those are just the ones that are legitimately doing business. And then you've got like 20,000 other companies that have just come to the scene in the last 6 or 12 months. I use the term digital snake oil, right? And it's good in healthcare. They're a doctor. You have to think about it. It's flooded with all the people that are promising to sky, right? You can do this with AI, this. Oh! Yeah. Yeah, it's actually one of the number one places in America now. Expats. I just heard that. Yeah, right. Yeah. Tropical, it's beautiful. Yeah, yeah. Oh. Yeah, I love it. Kuala Lumpur is very, yeah, it's very specific. I was just there actually in October. That,
So I lived in one city in Singapore.
oh, Singapore.
Right,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
then, yeah, right, it's literally.
But that's why I think part of the reason why Kuala Lumpur is so popular is now because they have consolidated. So let's say you are a well-to person, then you can, you're not only depending on relationships,
It's fascinating, right? Because KL is very, it's like very built out. Like Singapore's all built out.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's very built out, right? But then it's sort of like when you drive in between, right?
Yeah.
Then it's a very different country, right?
That's like China too. Like all the cities are amazing. When you walk through the city, they're more sophisticated than we are now. But then the minute you get outside the city, the city like ox carts and stuff.
Climbing into like this state, so like the center, right? So like the GW, right? Where Starbucks and everything, right? But when you go off the highway, you go to a place, right? Yeah, it's like an open supermarket.
Right, yeah, coffee and plastic bag. But honestly, I sort of like those places. I forgot. I said you have to go here. I said it. Thank you so much. Yes, so we'll just communicate through email. Let me know if you can help with anything. Thank you again so much. Thank you. Yes, come again. Next month, last Wednesday.
So I live.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I have a friend who teaches at James Cook. He's called Michael. We're not saying I think and something like that. Yeah, I would like it's another case.
Yeah. Oh, you said you just retired? But for the most okay. Yes. Sorry, this is so scattered.
So I'm guessing this is you.
Yeah, that's me. Yeah. Definitely connect.
I'm just sending you a request.
Perfect.